Okay, so we just got done. We watched The Innocents,
From 1961.
1961, with, what was her name? Deborah
Yeah.
Kerr?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was Deborah Kerr.
So this is a old movie. It's black and white. It's we think it's like made to be in like maybe the early 1900s or the late, probably not late 18, maybe the late 1800s.
I mean, it seemed like it was like, I don't know, 20s, 30s, something like that.
Yeah. But basically the storyline is there's this woman who is, whether she's there, she's talking to this gentleman about like some other thing in her life, but then he kind of brings up these two orphans that happen to be his as a niece and nephew, right? Yeah, niece and nephew, and they need a governess to like watch them and take care of them. And
After the last one had died under
the last one had died under weird circumstances. So then she, agrees, and he lives in this really big house that's in a remote place, and you meet the kids. The kids are kind of weird. The boy comes back. He was expelled from school. He was like in some boarding school. He was expelled, so he's home. So there's two kids. There's like this housekeeper who plays a predominant role as like the person you hear exchanging information with the main protagonist. And she kind of experiences things throughout the house that feel like there's some devil involved, or demon, or the kids are possessed. There's some, you learn about the past person who died, the last governess who was watching the kids die. There was a man named Quincy who we find out they're in love, and they died under mysterious circumstances. And then
was it Quint? I think it was
Quint.
Yeah.
I thought it was Quincy. I'm sorry, but like, yeah. Anyway, so she's convinced that they're possessed, and yeah, that's kind of
She becomes suspicious of the children.
Yeah,
the
yes.
children are doing what kids do. They tell secrets. To her, it's like almost like a taunting, like they know something that I don't.
Yeah,
they're
mocking
playing me.
They're
They're mocking me. She becomes, I mean, to the point where you start to feel like, maybe she's the one that's imagining this.
So that's a good kind of leeway into the plot. We kind of had some, you kind of develop certain ideas or theories of like what she's experiencing. I thought that the kids may have killed these people, and and then Aaron thought that they were possessed by the bodies of the woman and the man. And it's actually funny because the woman actually does come out and say that. She says that that's her theory, and she's telling this to the housekeeper, who's like, like she kind of just believes her, like she's like, all these weird things are, she can't explain them. But the one other thing that continues to happen is that the woman sees the man and the woman who are supposedly deceased, and nobody else can see them, but she is utterly convinced that they're real, and that this music, there's like a certain melody that brings their presence. And in under weird circumstances, like when the boy hums a tune, or when the girl's out in this like by the pond dancing, and then there's the woman and she's with the music box. So yeah, I mean, so what did you think of the movie, Aaron? Let me ask you that.
Well, so let's maybe back up a little bit and talk about just the actual time period that this is in. This is filmed in the 1960s, and we had talked about in the past, how do you watch an old movie faithfully? And
we did.
And I this is tough for me, because when I see this movie, I know it was made in the early 60s, and having not seen a lot of movies from this time period, it's very difficult for me to contextualize this movie along with what was happening at the time, because the way that people talk and behave is so embellished. Like, don't you feel like the way that people talk is like so much more?
It's very Victorian.
Yeah, it's very colorful, and everybody's like, "Oh yes, oh please, oh and maybe movies at this time period, maybe that was very common, but it almost feels like, in a lot of ways, it almost feels like you're sometimes watching like a Shakespearean play, like the way that people are so flourishy with the way that they talk and the way that they act, and I mean, they have like they almost have these soliloquies where they go into the light, and then she's got these like very piercing eyes, and just like I would say, just in terms of the time period, the way that they talk, I think that her the framing of the characters in this movie, the way that they use lighting to create dramatic effect is really effective.
Yeah.
I think it looks. I thought it looked great.
Yeah, I wasn't solely convinced that like it felt very it wasn't hard to watch because it was in black and white. And I feel like maybe that's because I've grown to appreciate like movies in an art form or something, but it felt very like the plot felt very compelling, and I agree like the cinematography part of it, like the lighting felt, it wasn't flashy, like you could tell it's a 60s movie, like it's not flashy. The way they talked, again, very very like eloquent, embellished, Shakespearean, however you want to call it, but it kind of distracts you. But like that, I'm guessing, I mean, that was a way that people talked at some point in human. I mean, we just don't communicate like that, so there is like a little bit of a barrier, but everything else felt very natural and believable, and it wasn't like the movie didn't pride itself on like big jump scares or big changes in like color. Obviously it's in black and white, but it really let like the mood set the scenes, and it did a really good job with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of scenes where you see a figure sort of shrouded in darkness. I mean, it looks great. It looks extremely, extremely well done. I think it's very striking. I think it elevates the movie a lot. I think that it's, again, I think that this is where like me as just sort of a casual movie watcher has a very difficult time knowing how do I want to put this? How forward-thinking was that conceptually as a movie
In the 60s.
as a storytelling
Yeah.
thing to do, like in a movie? I mean, it's probably not like cutting edge. I think
Yeah.
that, we're talking the 60s. We're not talking about like the 40s. We're not talking about the 30s or anything. But I still think that it was very effective.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the elephant in the room is, I think a movie like this is going to be difficult to scare a modern artist or audience. Like, I don't feel like at any point in this movie I was like afraid.
Yeah.
But I thought that it was like they were telling a pretty effective story.
Yeah,
through imagery.
I'm trying to think of like, and you want to compare. I mean, maybe you can look and see what other horror movies were coming out like in the 60s like
exactly.
this. I wonder if it plays along with that. I think it is more an effective, like, good spooky story rather than like a horror film, I guess, if you really want to like, kind of split hairs.
I mean, something that might help. I mean, have you seen Psycho?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, that was created 1960. So
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, that can kind of help, I guess, sort of color the landscape of what horror movies were like in this time period.
Yeah, I think it kind of goes along with, like, I mean, there's just a difference. It's like there's a nuance with like films now because of all the scenes, like the way they can like, computerize effects, but all their effects, like the music, it's all like analog or practical effects. So which there weren't, I'm not going to say there was like there's not a ton of effects. It's all about like dramatic lighting, dramatic scenes, shrilling of like violins or other instruments that like really pull you into like, oh, this is dangerous or this is concerning for the character. Like even the facial expressions, to me, like I know characters now act, but like the lighting on like you said, like the lighting on her face and like her eyes being like bright eyed, and like the ending scene, obviously there's spoilers, but like the ending scene where she's like looking at the boy and like she's really rattled, and you could just tell in her face, like the moonlight from her hitting her face, it's just like very, you could tell how much it means to the character, like how she's very concerned.
I mean, like, these are movies that are not able to leverage
right
the sorts of
like
more modern
Right.
movie storytelling techniques, and so they maybe double down on lighting, they
Oh
double
yeah,
down
I think they
on
did.
dialogue, and
We did watch this on YouTube, by the way. So there was some compressive
yeah, there's like
elements to
artifacts
it.
and stuff. There's
Yeah, like the
all kinds
grays and
of
the blacks kind of meshed together because I'm sure it wasn't. I mean, but it looked. I mean, for a YouTube video, it was pretty good. I was kind of shocked.
yeah. I think that it looked. I mean, honestly, I think that where you noticed it was honestly just whenever it would get super super dark, and you just have a lot of compression at that point. But
Yeah.
so still kind of sticking on like the time period, because I feel like that's such a unique aspect to this particular movie is I mean again I feel like just as sort of a casual movie watcher I feel like I'm really not I don't have the full appreciation for it, but I think that, and I don't know if it's intentional or not, but a movie like this, when you're listening to these kids talk, it is like there's a part of you that feels like they just seem disingenuous.
Yeah.
Like, don't you get that sense
I
of
think
like
even though they're speaking in that way, I
they're
feel
extremely eloquent. They
Yeah.
have to be no older than 6.
Yeah, like-
and they are like
Yeah.
extremely eloquent. They are witty. They are sharp, and it is like it is. I think, and maybe it was like this if you saw this movie in the time period it came out, but. At least for me today, it's like kids don't talk like this.
Yeah.
Like these kids, there's something up with these kids.
Yeah,
like, it just seems disingenuous.
I kind of agree. I think that's intentional. I think that the movie does a good job of making you feel. I mean, it feels unnatural for a kid to speak the way that they did. And I'm not saying like for the time period, because I know kids' language was different back when the era was depicted, but even like the subtle things that they spoke, or like the tone was just so like very aggressive towards what you would expect to be like somebody you would put more respect towards. I think a lot of the times, especially when the boy was speaking to the woman, he was very just like, I don't want to say bratty is not a good term. It felt like he was very above, like he felt himself more important than her.
Yeah, I mean, like I mean, I think the thing that was very intentional is that he was just very sharp-witted.
Yeah,
like
for someone his age.
Yeah, I mean, like they made it a point throughout this movie that this woman, the lead in this movie, she would sometimes stumble over her words. She was, sometimes stumbling over her ideas and her thoughts. But the kid was always just like on it, on it. He had a retort, a quick witty statement to something that she had said.
Yeah,
and it just really made you have this feeling that like these are adults in children bodies.
Yeah, that's kind of what we kind of plaused that before she spoke that, and it's probably something that the movie obviously wants you to feel like that's probably something that is about possibility, that I feel like they did a really good job with kind of displaying that again amongst, it's just like the kid actors were great. I mean, and actresses, the boy who played I can't think of his name right now, but and Flora,
Miles,
yes, Miles and Flora. They very good. I mean, I wonder what they're doing now. Is kind of what I wonder if they're famous or doing something. But I was impressed with like the way that it was so well done.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, like
language wise, like
yeah, I think that it was they do something I think we've talked about several times is they really maximized the movie. Like they only had a few parts to this movie, and I think they did a lot with that. We talked about it before. I don't know how much. It's hard to tell when the movie is in black and white and you're trying to suss this out from a movie that's older, is how much of this environment is real versus manufactured. Like some of it is like, I mean, you and I saw the house. We're like, this is a gigantic house.
Yeah.
How much of this is a real home?
I'm guessing from a distance they can make it look bigger, but yeah, it might have been done on like paper. I don't know, but
I mean, inside, like I could absolutely be convinced that this was like filmed inside of a beautiful real house. Castle or
something really elaborate. But it was very ornate and massive. So I guess when we talk about the timepiece, we talk about like that era. To me, I guess the question is, I want to know what you think. if we want to discuss this now, is do you think that she was like? Do you think she was just crazy?
Yeah. Well, so, okay. Yeah. This is kind of what I wanted to jump to next. Is like, what was your interpretation of the ending?
So the ending is there was some mysterious part about like this garden. There was like a bunch of statues, and there was one in the
Which
middle.
they played the statue stuff a lot.
There was a lot of statues. It was creepy.
Looking into the windows,
Yes.
everywhere. There were statues all over
there
the
was
place.
like, yeah, definitely. And I think they kind of like, he was found outside there at one point, and like she's convinced like he was out there doing something shady. This is when she believed that he was possessed by whatever. And so the very end, that she's out there and she's like screaming at him. She is hysterical, and he is like, "Whoa, lady! Like I'm not lying to you. I don't know who you're talking about." So she sees this murdered man, Quint, who she believes is possessing the boy's body, and so she's like, "I see him. Don't you see him?" And then he's like, doesn't say anything. Looks up, and then he dies. He dies, and it's like tragic, and it's very quiet. And then she's convinced like, oh, he died because he let you go. And there's a part where you see Quint or a ghost or whatever hold up his hand and does kind of like this claw motion with the palm facing them. That made it more confusing to me. To me, whenever she started to see visions, I think you're supposed to believe she's just crazy. Especially at the beginning when she's talking to the uncle about first taking on these children. What does he ask her? He's like, do you imagine things? And she's like, oh, yeah, I imagine things all the time.
Yeah.
So I think, but I think that's the fun part of the show is like, you really don't know. And it can go both ways. Like there's like, you're going to make arguments for both sides. I think I was more convinced that like you were going to find the bodies of these people. But in the end, I'm convinced she was crazy. But also then, there's two parts that I can't convince myself what happened. Was one, the kid does die. Like, how does the kid die after, this interaction that nobody, like, he wasn't touched or anything like that. And then there's another thing I'll kind of go on along with that. And then the part where she hears like the lady, the old governess die, or she's dead. She goes to the schoolroom, and then she hears her crying. And then what does she see on the table is a tear. And that's when she's convinced that the Flora, the little girl, is possessed by the woman because whatever reason. But like there are physical parts to this mystery that you can't explain.
Yeah, so her overall goal, like what in her head, and me, like her being Miss Giddens,
mm-hmm.
her idea is that if she can convince these children to say the name or sort of embrace the fact
that they're
that both Quint and Miss Jessel have passed, they will be effectively freed from this what she believes is like a possession or not even necessarily possession, but just sort of like being a prisoner of these of these ghosts.
Yeah.
And she's never vindicated on that.
No.
Like, in fact, I think it's kind of interesting that you sort of like, I mean, the movie's called The Innocents, and it's like, well, who's that? Who does that apply to? I think that could be applied to a lot of different people in this movie. I think that's, my interpretation is a lot like yours. I don't think that we're ever convinced that she has saved these children. In fact, like the other individual in this movie, the other, what is it, like a maid that she's helping watch the kids with, is even suggesting like...
Miss Gross, yeah.
Yeah, she's even suggesting that, are you sure that this is helpful for the children to do what you're doing?
Yeah.
She's challenging this idea that is the thing that you're doing, do you think that that's actually helping them? And I mean, for Flora, she has a screaming fit. She has to leave her home. She has to go elsewhere. I mean, she tells Miles that she's going to London. I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but
yeah.
But then Miles obviously it dies from I don't know if it's from like fright or from from who knows what,
the ghosts, right?
But you always see these manifestations of these ghosts through her perspective, whether it's the tear, whether it's the Miss Jessel in like the swamp, whether it's Quint in the garden. You never really like you don't ever see these characters seeing these ghosts, and so I tend to think the same thing. I feel like she is
imagining things.
She feels like this is going to free the children.
Yeah, I think there's a part where you see Miss Jessel, the old governess, you see her standing in like the swampy area, and it's raining outside, and then she kind of startles Flora by saying like, "Don't you see it? Don't you see it?" And then she's screaming. The little girl's screaming now because she's like, "I don't see anything. What you're talking about?" And then Miss Gross, the housekeeper, who's kind of been again kind of the pal to the protagonist, is kind of like, "Yeah, I saw it too." But then like later on, after she can't get the girl to stop screaming, she was like, "I didn't see anything. Like I don't know what you're talking about." And then you kind of find out like, then it kind of does nail in that perception that again, the person that only sees things is the main girl who's we believe is having in a big imagination. Or Miss Giddens, sorry. So, but the other things that kind of come up and just feel very strange, just like that are unexplained. So a couple things. I'm sure you can think of others, but it kind of becomes weird. They talk about like the older woman and the older man who are dead now. I'm not going to say their names because I keep getting it mixed up. Quint and then
Miss Jessel.
Mm-hmm. They're dead, and then they talk about their influence on the children. Like they're doing obscene things, but like not behind closed doors. So you kind of get like there's this sexual tension, and then you're like there's like it feels very strange because it says about like the kids would watch, and you're like, I'm not sure if that's what they're alluding to. So that was kind of strange.
I think like my interpretation of what they were talking about was they would tell secrets, they would like be lovey-dovey with each other, like maybe PDA kind of thing.
You're talking about the older, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. They
okay.
and
the kids just would watch and giggle about it, right? Or just
I don't even know if it was necessarily that as much as it was just like the Miss Jessel and Quint didn't try to hide their PDA, maybe like affections of maybe they were getting too like touchy-feely with each other, and then they felt like hey, this is save it for later. But I think that that was my interpretation of that.
That's like one part. So then there was some other parts that were like, let's go play hide and seek, and then that's when you really start to get like the cinematic, masterpiece. I feel like this movie was pretty close to, or at least is by some people. You go through the house and it's very quiet. It's whatever. She goes to the attic and then she sees a picture of Quint, and then you're like, oh, she's like, oh my gosh, this is the guy that I saw on top of the tower. I didn't see him before, and this is his picture. This is somebody. How would I know what he looks like if I've never seen him before? But now she's staring at this picture, and then then the music box is playing the tune that they keep singing. The girl or the kids keep singing, and then out jumps Miles, and then he's putting his hand around her neck, and then she's like, oh my, you're choking me, dude, like stop. And he's kind of laughing, but he's choking her, and she kind of gets more uncomfortable, and she's like, I'm hurting here, like you better, Miles better, so it's like, was he actually choking her, or is she like imagining that? And then Flora comes out and is like, oh, and then oh, you found us, we're playing hide and seek, and so then he lets go, and you're kind of like, that was just kind of bizarre, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, I mean, again, like I feel like a lot of this stuff ends up being her imagination. At least that's my interpretation, and I think that this movie is intentionally vague for you to have your own.
But then that's why I go to this because the next scenes are more. I don't know
why is the remote doing
I don't know. we're laughing because my TV apparently has Google attached to it, and it's literally repeating
It's
the things that
transcribing everything we're saying right now into a search field that I don't know where it's sending it to.
I wish it would stop. But the parts that like I challenge that belief is because there are two physical things that happen, and not even because of interpretation, is because when he was like at the end, towards the end of the movie, like in the later half, he catches the boy outside in the garden. He's like, I'll tell you why I was out there. I was just being silly. Haha. I wanted to try to show you that I'm actually a bad kid and we could be bad because I know we're so good all the time. And then she feels under his pillow, what's this? A bird with a broken neck. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll bury it tomorrow. And she's like, how the hell did this bird break his neck? So you kind of like, that's physical, right? That's not just a perception thing. She didn't perceive that.
When I say that, so here's what I mean by that is
well, like you mean like, go ahead, sorry.
So what I mean is I think that a lot of this movie is about the idea of, are these children doing children things?
Yeah.
Or are they doing something nefarious?
Yeah.
And I think that is a lot of, like,
yeah,
going back to something you earlier had said is she doesn't really start to look into kids tell secrets. They tell secrets, they run around and stuff like that. She doesn't start seeing that until much later as being like malevolent. Mm-hmm. She starts seeing normal children behavior as being dubious or there's something
deceiving or like deeper.
They're doing something and these kids are liars. She starts calling them liars, and it's like, well, these kids have only had a handful of conversations with you.
Yeah, that's true.
And so, like, yes, it's definitely weird that there's a dead dove under his bed or a pigeon. But in the same way, like, kids sometimes will, you and I both have kids, they will sometimes not realize playing around that they're hurting you. And I think that in her mind, she is starting to see this as like nefarious and evil and malevolent. Whereas like in a lot of these cases, the pigeon notwithstanding, is like, well, these are kids just doing kids things. And you are seeing them as like, bad and evil.
Well, and when you kind of like tie that in with like, again, like badly connotated music or things that like they kind of like they put this like
sting
like there's like, oh, there's a dead dove, and then there's like a part where like they kiss goodnight and it's almost like it becomes like, I don't want to get too weird, but like,
I mean, he kisses her on the mouth.
He kisses her on the mouth, and there's obvious the audience is supposed to be like, what the hell? Like, that's weird. But like, again, is it, to your point, is that like the perception problem that she's experiencing? There is a little bit of like weird sexual tension, and I'm not saying like it's mostly like maybe because of the older adults. And in the parts that like we both noticed that like when she's walking in the house during the middle of the night one time when she's trying to find the kids and one of the boys outside in the garden, there's a part where he's like, she hears laughing, like a woman's laughter, not a girl's laughter. It's a woman's laughter and like a man's voice kind of like interchanging. It's like repeating. It's like ominous. And she goes into the room and then she sees like, well, it's like a curtain rod, like a curtain, string, and it's going back and forth, and you hear like this certain noise, and you're thinking, it felt very
well. I mean, to be clear, what you're saying is that like there are parts of the story between Miss Jessel and Quint that she overhears about. Again, this is a couple that loves each other. They're the older adults that worked there that had died, and part of what she's hearing is a couple that are, they sounds like they are in a bedroom and they're having fun and they're, and
but the notion that, and you're trying to figure out what does this mean, to me, it's like, cause like she's convinced like they're possessed, like the kids are possessed. So it's like, I think she's like truly frightened about, the things that she thinks about. To me, it's this movie. It does things uniquely that like I don't think I've ever seen before in a movie. But there's there's like a whole level of discomfort when she's walking around the house and hearing these things, and she can't discern what the fake from the real is. Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of things that are physical. Again, like we talk about like the dove and like her perception of like them, like a goodnight kiss being more bizarre
Yeah, I
than
mean, like that definitely was bizarre because like
well, and then in the end, when he's dead, the boy's dead, she kisses him back, and then to me, it's like maybe like the first time that happens, she just thought that, and then the second time when he's dead, that is her just like actually reciprocating a certain like I don't know. I don't know if I want to go there, but like it does feel weird.
I mean, like, yeah, I mean,
I don't know what to say.
So let's go back. Like the dove thing. Like to me, if we were to continue to interpret kids are kids and do weird things,
sure.
I mean, it seems like it's perfectly reasonable to think a kid sees a dead animal, doesn't really know what to do, feels compassion for the animal,
that's
feels
fair.
like, I need to do something with this. Mm-hmm. But the obvious thing is that you're hinted at that he killed this pigeon. Mm-hmm. And, they don't ever say that.
Yeah,
but your mind wanders in that way.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
But like the kissing thing, very strange. I mean, obviously that's extremely weird. I don't necessarily have a good answer for that. But I would say that, as far as like the pigeon stuff, the kid grabbing her around the neck, and not like, not like hands around the neck, but like your
arm.
Almost like a headlock, and kids sometimes get rough whenever they're playing, and then they, don't realize that they're hurting you. And so, I mean, again, I think that it's the idea of innocence, and who are the innocents in the subject when they call this movie The Innocents is intentionally vague.
Yeah.
I think that, like, in a lot of ways, the children were innocent, and this woman came in and frightened Flora and was culpable in some way for the death of Miles.
I agree. Yeah, because of paranoia.
And the maid, like, she has to leave, and so a lot of these people are entertaining these sorts of strange ideas from this woman.
It's almost interesting because like and they kind of tell you like the maid, Miss Gross, she is uneducated, and there is some sort of like undenying trust that she has in Miss Gibbons about like her perceptions of the children, even though like she's like, I've seen many children and this is like normal kid behavior, and then the main character Miss Gibbons is like, no, this is not so you kind of go back and forth on that. The ending kind of like the lead up to the ending when he was in because the boy Miles was expelled from school, and she was like, I have to know why, right? That's like the big part, like, why were you expelled from school? And it's so funny because like, what was his reason? It was just like, he was like,
he said things. The boys didn't.
He just said things, and it was just like, it concerned the masters, and
they never really say.
But to me, it's like funny because like that's like, as a kid, what do you think of like when a kid's like, you're like, why would you do this? And then what do kids say? I don't know, right? I don't know why I did that, and it makes me laugh because like that is a totally believable thing a kid would say. Like, why were you making up noise, or why did you say that? And they're like, he's like, I have no idea.
Yeah, and I mean, to be clear, in this movie, they never say the things he said. They just sort of hint that he says things that are likely what's happening is he's overheard things like
from any.
Yeah, like if you have, so he looked up to Quint. Quint was what seems like
that's
some, I don't know, like 20-year-old dude.
Yeah.
And he's probably saying things that was impressionable to this kid. The kid's repeating them at school.
Yeah.
The kid gets in trouble. That's my guess as to what's happening. But I think that throughout the movie, like, I don't know if you felt this way, but I think throughout the movie, they make you sort of feel like, did you hurt somebody? Did you kill somebody? Like,
and then again, the circumstances surrounding the death of those two people, the man and the woman, are very vague, right? They're intentionally vague for you to feel like that, right? He was drunk and he had a bludgeoned wound. He got hit in the head and he fell down the stairs, and of course, but to me, it's like I don't know. It's hard to say that you couldn't convince yourself the kid did it because like the kid was Miles was very upset apparently. The housemaid was telling you that Miles was very upset by that, and I kind of agree. Like you once you hear things from older people, you just tend to repeat them without knowing the purpose behind it. So it probably was like, whoa, weird to these.
I mean, these are two children who are influenced by significant tragedy around them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, Quint gets drunk,
Dies.
he falls down the stairs or whatever, and he dies because he hits his head.
Mm-hmm.
And then Miss Jessel, yeah, Miss Jessel, she commits suicide because of her grief.
Yeah, that's true.
And so I feel like the way that these kids are behaving are ways that I would anticipate kids of this age behaving if they were confronted with some incredibly traumatic experiences.
Yeah, it's. I agree. I think the more that we discuss it, it feels more clear. But I did think the ending was a little bit vague, but also just gives you enough to like make you think that maybe she wasn't crazy, maybe she wasn't, But there was you see a lot of the like perceptions of her seeing Quint as like a Maleficent type figure, because when the boy starts laughing about like he was really upset with her because she's freaking him out, he calls her a bunch of names, and then he starts laughing, but then you start seeing Quint laugh behind the glass, which you never really see him like physically, like she doesn't physically see him, at least like within a reach of touching him. It's always like from a distant, or he's behind glass or in a reflection, so I think that's part of her, coming to terms with she is going a little crazy.
I mean, I think that, to me, my interpretation is like this boy is saying things that he wouldn't have normally said, but he's saying them because he's influenced by this individual, whether it was in his life or death. I would be curious to know from people who feel like the movie is it takes the more literal approach, because honestly, I feel like it's like the more that we discuss this, the more I feel like it's like unambiguous that I do think she's imagining this.
Yeah.
Like I feel like
it feels more obvious.
I think the movie is a lot less interesting if it's more literal. I think it's a lot more interesting that you start seeing that this person working with these children was imagining things so deeply that it ended up harming the children, both physically and also emotionally. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, overall, I liked the movie. Like, I think that if I knew a little bit more about movies in this time period and what life was like in both in the 1960s and the time period this movie takes place, I think that I would maybe appreciate it more. But I think, like, I enjoyed it. I don't know that I'd give it a super high rating, but I think that, again, I think if I had more depth in the area, areas, I think I'd have a better appreciation for it.
I'm a little bit more. I give movies a lot of good credit. Like I'm maybe less. I don't want to say you're critical. I think that a movie that does something so well in such a short time frame, with practical effects, like analog, like when like very like practical music, no digital effects. I'm doubting maybe there was that much, if any. I mean, I was impressed. I think that our dialogue about the movie has been like one of the more fun movies to discuss, because there's some ambiguity. Yeah, I thought it was really good. I would recommend this movie to anybody, because it does something so simple. Like, it's not even, it's about things that like you've seen before. Like, it's not like anything crazy new, but like it comes across so simple but like effective.
I mean, I think that's these movies that are a lot older than maybe the movies that you're seeing in the time period of which you're born. I think they face a challenge. I think that it is very difficult for me to know how ahead of the curve was a movie like this at the time period. Like I feel like in a lot of ways, like I really wish I had a deeper knowledge and more appreciation for that, because I think that I do have a lot of appreciation for a movie that is taking an ambiguous. Some movies take an ambiguous approach, and it just kind of feels like
they couldn't decide.
Yeah, like they were just like, I don't know, like let's just have the audience decide how it ended.
Yeah,
and in a lot of ways, it feels like they kind of just phoned it in.
Yeah,
but I feel like it was. I feel like it was like very intentional from the very start.
I agree.
That I mean, from the very beginning of this conversation, where she said that she does imagine, she has a deep imagination. I think that they were always setting the table for this to be something that you're thinking about. Is she really telling? Does she really believe this? Is this really happening?
There's a lot of lines about truth and fake, and then again imaginations, and you know, I was, you know, we look for the protagonist, we look for like the antagonist, like the bad guy. Like, who is the bad guy in this movie? Like, I know we're trying to wrap things up, but like, who do you think the?
Yeah,
I feel like it's one of those movies that like doesn't have a true antagonist. Like, there's no bad. I mean, maybe it's just her psyche, if you want to say it like that. But yeah, I feel like, again, like you said, that there was a point. Like, everything was done intentionally to make you feel just enough to like, I'm gonna just make sure you feel just a little bit like, are you sure about that? Like,
yeah, I mean, like, she just doesn't. To me, she doesn't really ever seem to have pure motives for what she's doing. She says she's trying to save the children, and it's not clear
what she's saving them from.
Right, like it. I mean, when she sees these entities, when she sees these ghosts, they don't do anything. They're not like coming for the children. They're not like trying to get inside. They're just observing.
Yeah.
And in fact, like, the children don't even see them.
Yeah. And one time they, you know, in the very end, like, the Quint was laughing with the boy, but that's just like that. I agree, because it's not something that she can change or interact with, because how she perceived Miles is exactly how she perceived Quint, right? Like, I mean, you know, so there wasn't like the ghosts weren't doing anything of their own accord.
I mean, to me, it just seemed like what the movie is trying to communicate is that Miles is showing the influence that Quint had in his life when Quint was alive, versus like this ghost manipulating Quint. I didn't, or manipulating Miles. I didn't see it like that. I didn't see like this ghost controlling the children. Like, in a lot of ways, her motivations aren't particularly pure about what she wants to do. I think that in a lot of ways, all it's doing is driving the children away. It's, I mean,
well, it's hurting, especially with the girl when she was screaming. Like, clearly she was affected by her actions and what she said to her.
I mean, you can kind of hear this sort of like, I mean, throughout the movie, like, there's a couple times where you can just hear almost her spiraling of like, she says, you know, the children, they're just liars, and you're just like, whoa, like, I mean, so you can tell that, like, to me, in my mind, I think that there's a case that she is both the protagonist and her motivations are the antagonist.
I feel like, I agree. I think the movie, you typically can find in almost any movie, like, even if you want to say it's like some entity is the antagonist, but you can almost find like a physical antagonist, but in this case, it's a little less obvious.
Yeah, so. I mean, I did enjoy this.
I liked it a lot too.
Is this a movie I'd watch a second time around? Maybe. I mean, this might be one that, like, maybe I would come back to some years later.
I think so too. I wouldn't sit here and critique it again.
Yeah, I think that, like, this is a movie that after I've watched it, I'm like, oh, I got to go again, or I'll be thinking, you know, maybe I'll be thinking about it for a couple of days, but I think that I'd have a better appreciation if I come back to this years down the road. But I think it was worth watching. Yeah. Especially, I mean, can we say that it's, I mean, we said it was on YouTube.
You can,
I guess, like, you know, don't send the FBI over here. But, you know, it's on YouTube. So it wasn't hard for us to find.
I mean, it's funny because, like, the intro of the YouTube video was, it was like this woman. Yeah. I swear it was. It looks like this movie's been on for more. Like, the picture, she talked to the camera. She's like, I hope YouTube was okay with this.
It has like 65,000 views.
But it's only been on here for a year. But so to me, it's funny because like I feel like it's been re-uploaded because like she looks like she's from like the late maybe mid '90s, right? Her hair. But yeah, I mean it's on YouTube. So I mean
I'll put it. I don't know. Like I'll put it this way. It's like I feel like if this. We tried to rent this.
Yeah.
We tried to find a place to rent this legitimately because I would prefer to do that.
Yeah.
And there just wasn't a way to do it. And so I feel like I hope that the people involved in creating this are more thrilled that people found a way to
like
view
us.
it.
Yeah.
Versus being like, well, I guess we can't ever see that movie.
If you ever listen to this, we will pay you the rental fee
of going on YouTube.
Yeah. I think the last thing I'll say is like there is some significance between like the noun, the innocence, and then there's also like I guess it's an adjective or maybe it's an adverb of I need to go back to language arts, but innocence, like being innocent, right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's some connection between. Right. So I thought that was interesting, but yeah, I agree. If you want to watch it, it's on YouTube.
Yep, check it out.